everybody. Welcome to My Body, My Pod. I am so excited today to have one of my favorite people, one of my great partners in the movement, a fighter for freedom and democracy, Skye Perryman, President and CEO of Democracy Forward. Skye, thank you for being here. We have so much to unpack. The FDA, the Supreme Court,
voting
rights. It's almost too much. So I'll try to be efficient because I know we could probably spend the entire time just talking about one of those topics. Yes. But why don't we start with, let's talk about Democracy Forward. I think most of the folks who watch this pod know who you are and what you do. You've been a frequent commentator on cable news. You are out there literally filing a case against Trump. Is it weekly? Because it feels weekly. You file a lot
more than once a week
against this administration.
Yes.
But you've been around for a while. Can you just talk a little bit about the Oregon?
Sure.
Your pathway.
Democracy Forward is an organization that was founded right after Trump's first inauguration, when the American people started seeing all of these very fast. It appeared.
So 2016.
2017. So remember, that seemed a fast incursion on our rights.
Right.
And so at Democracy Forward, we have an incredible team of lawyers that file cases free of charge for people in communities to make sure their rights are protected. We file a lot of cases against this administration, but we also file a lot of cases against, for instance, like our home state of Texas, and state governments as well that can be really harmful to people. And we also do a lot of work to build community and coalitions across the country. We're at democracyforward.org. But I bet a bunch of folks that are tuning in know about us.
So we've actually worked together on one of these legal interventions, which was a FOIA request to the FDA, because we realized there was a lot of stuff going on with medication abortion and mifepristone, and we wanted to know what they were up to. And that, fast forward to now, when we actually see the results of what they were up to with the court. Well, we haven't seen the full picture, but we are coming right off of a Supreme Court, I wouldn't say a decision, but a temporary stay. Talk about what just happened. An order that for now has given us relief on a potential nationwide ban on mifepristone through the mail.
Absolutely.
But it's temporary, and we're tracking a lot of things. But you, before Democracy Forward, were chief counsel at ACOG,
yes,
which is the Professional Association for OBGYNs. You worked really closely with a lot of my former colleagues at Planned Parenthood, and you represent the mifepristone manufacturers. So you're the perfect person to have on right now to tell us what the heck's going on.
First of all, thank you for all that you and Repro Freedom for All are doing to sound the alarm, because people are not talking about this the way they should, which we'll also
talk about. Thank you.
But let's just say, as most folks that are tuning into this know, mifepristone has been safe and effective for decades, or has been recognized as safe and effective for decades, approved by the FDA for the early termination of pregnancy. And since 2023, it has been available via telehealth and in pharmacies.
That's right.
Before that time,
which is a Biden-era rule change.
It was a Biden-era rule change. It was based on decades of study and data, and about a 6-month period during the COVID-19 pandemic when ACOG and Sister Song and other organizations, when we sued the FDA in Trump 1.0, when FDA had lifted telehealth restrictions on all kinds of medications, including opioids, except mifepristone. And so you then had data right in your backyard showing this was safe and effective. FDA used that, as well as the years of study, and made it accessible, followed the science, made it accessible by telehealth and in pharmacies. Before that, you had to go into a doctor and be physically handed, a clinician physically handed a pill, even though your clinician could easily examine you, see you via telehealth.
And that wasn't science-based. That was
never science-based.
Ideological.
Correct. It was never science-based. So that the scientific finally a scientific change that made the medication more accessible. It has been critical since Dobbs, because since Dobbs, what you have is, while there are so many people that are still needing reproductive health care, if you actually look at the number of pregnancy terminations, they've gone up since Dobbs, not down. And that's because medication has been made more readily accessible, consistent with the science. So far-right states have sued, as they do, to try to get the courts to block that
Right, because there's
FDA
multiple
labeling.
cases.
There's multiple
Louisiana,
cases.
Missouri.
Then there's multiple cases. There's a case in Florida. And so this is really over the accessibility of mifepristone. The Fifth Circuit issued an order that is so unscientific and legally baseless that would have disrupted care across the country. And you've been talking a lot about that. And so the manufacturers had no option but to go to the Supreme Court and ask the Supreme Court to pause that order, which it has done. Now, some things we need to be paying attention to.
Please.
So number one,
Like, what does that mean?
FDA,
what happens?
So first of all, FDA is also in this case. And in the courts below, FDA was even urging the Fifth Circuit to not block telehealth right now because it's saying it's doing this FDA review of mifepristone. Now, we have a lot we want to learn about that FDA review, and that could potentially be a threat. But just to be very clear, these states were so out on right field here that they were even opposite the administration as well as the manufacturers. One thing I want to highlight about this order, it does provide temporary relief. People can now get mifepristone as they have been, but the litigation is going to continue. And so this threat is out there and is looming. And then you have all these other threats with the anti-abortion community coming out, the anti-choice community coming out and trying to, run political plays, even on the president, claiming that like this administration isn't anti-abortion enough.
They met in the White House right on the eve of Martin McCary being pushed out as the FDA commissioner, right? The new interim FDA leader is calling them and they're posting about how he's been assuring them.
Correct. So
he's
this
gonna
is
take
not
action.
normal. And
this
is
is
not
very
normal.
political.
As you know.
And this was to be an independent agency.
Correct. And as you know, because you've served in positions in administrations, you didn't get to go call over to the FDA and say, hey, I'm Minnie, I have some requests for you. Like, that does not how this works.
And we were definitely not meeting in the White House.
Right. Exactly.
Independent agency means the White House is not supposed to be directing.
Exactly. So this threat is out there, but the Supreme Court has done the right thing here and at least paused the Fifth Circuit order. But what I want to talk about, I don't know if you looked at that document that came out. You have Thomas and Alito.
Oh, I really want to talk about this.
Okay, let's do it.
But before we go to that, can you just explain, now that it's kicked back down, what do you think is going to happen in the Fifth Circuit?
I mean,
do they now hear arguments?
There will now be a range of proceedings in the district court and the Fifth Circuit.
Okay.
And I don't know that schedules have been set yet, so we'll keep you updated on that.
But it's to argue the merits of the case, whereas this was all procedural.
This was all procedural.
Okay, that's helpful. So the Alito, let's talk about the Alito dissent first, because I have such mixed feelings about it, because on one hand, I feel like he basically said our movement is winning. He said that shield laws and things that protect providers because of telehealth, that we are undermining the Dobbs decision. And I said, hell yeah, we are. Kudos and congratulations to abortion providers, states that have codified a right, have passed shield laws to protect providers, and telehealth providers taking the risk. Because we're winning. We're getting abortion care into banned states. And that's what his dissent was about, in part. It
was so interesting. First of all, even though he wrote the Dobbs decision, it's like he kind of misunderstands
his own decision.
The Dobbs decision, right? Because the Dobbs decision does say, okay, well, you can leave it to the states. Well, the states are doing a lot of things right now. States are protecting their clinicians. Some states are protecting reproductive health care access. So states are doing a lot of things. You guys have been so, at Repro Freedom for All, so active in that. But secondly, it doesn't override the Constitution. What Dobbs said was that there wasn't a privacy interest recognized by the Constitution to protect access to abortion. It did not override things like, I don't know, the Supremacy Clause, which is, which clearly says that federal law prevails over state law when the two conflict. It didn't override, let's say, the First Amendment, which clearly says that some of the counseling that clinicians do. So there's also this whole thing where immediately after Dobbs, and he got to write the opinion, but immediately after Dobbs, he and others across the country have sought to expand. As bad as Dobbs was, they have sought to sort of expand
its interpretation,
what it means.
Yes.
And then they're mad that the states are winning, and kudos to you and all the movement leaders and all the, community members who were probably never considered themselves part of a movement that have been doing things.
Abortion funds.
100%.
Hotlines to help folks self-manage care, pro bono networks, helping
and what
people.
did we say? What did we say for those years leading up to Dobbs? Supreme Court, and this is going to be relevant on voting too, I think, but Supreme Court, you can issue a decision overturning Roe. You're not going to be able to stop
You'll never be able to stop
reproductive health care happening in this country.
That's right. And what's fascinating to me is at the same time he's giving a playbook. He's telling the administration, and he's done it before in the course of these proceedings, hey, FDA, hurry up. Like the court doesn't want to make a decision on this. They don't want to be the ones undermining the FDA authority. They're like, hey, you have the authority. Go ahead and change the REMS.
And to go full circle on this, in ACOG v. FDA, which was that case that we brought in the pandemic, represented by ACLU and Arnold Porter, ACOG brought to challenge FDA because it did make an unscientific determination. It was completely arbitrary that everyone you could get
classify
opioids.
Miffy one
you could
way
get opioids by mail, and you couldn't get mifepristone. And women that needed mifepristone were having. It was terrible. Justice Roberts on the shadow docket, just a few days before Biden gets inaugurated, the Supreme Court blocked that court order on the shadow docket. They didn't block it, by the way, right before the election. It went up before the election. They didn't block it. But then just right before Biden comes in, they block it. If you go back and pull that decision, you'll see an explanation from Justice Roberts about the importance of deferring to the FDA. And so I do think that this court, or at least, some members of it, are in a bit of a pickle here with this litigation. And we also, of course, think that there's just no basis for these states sued. I mean, I just want to say that. This isn't like trickery or whatever. This is just like, it is such a baseless thing that they're trying to do.
And Louisiana doesn't have standing. I mean, we're disputing Louisiana's standing.
Standing, the merits of the whole thing. I mean.
And just to explain to folks who maybe lay people don't follow what the definitions are, Louisiana has to prove some type of harm was done to the state of Louisiana by allowing mifepristone by mail. And they haven't adequately done that. At least that's the argument.
They haven't done that. And the last time anti-abortion extremists came for mifepristone, and you did so much work on this, the Supreme Court in a 9-0. This Supreme Court in a 9-0 decision found that the anti-abortion group, the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine,
the made-up group,
exactly. Yeah. So this is
this is where they actually can be sometimes consistent as a court. You know better.
Well, I think this is this creates a lot of political and legal issues for this court. We know in the law the states are completely wrong, but this is also a court that's shown that it can be political at times.
Yes.
And so it's interesting. Like, does the administration really want everybody in the country having access to their medications strained right before a midterm election? But that's why we say the threat is still there, because this is a temporary order keeping things in place right now. The litigation's continuing, and we've also seen the court and, frankly, the administration do different things when it doesn't feel like it's right on the cusp of an election. So we'll just have to see kind of how it plays out.
And the Thomas dissent really focused on Comstock. Can you talk about that? Because right in the wake of that, I saw several anti-abortion, leaders online screaming, Comstock, this is it. You need to enforce Comstock. This has been like sort of a sleeper threat that we've seen since the mifepristone case that went to the court in 2024 that you were just talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anthony Comstock
let's go way
was
back.
This guy in the 1800s that had like a lot of issues.
I just want to say that again, 1800s.
1800s. We're in the 1800s, guys. Had a lot of issues with people having freedom. Did not want people to be able to mail any obscene material through the mail. Well, if that's, books, it's,
information
about
anything,
it's
sex.
Whatever. And so, correct. So just to be very clear where we're going back to, the law has been broadly abrogated. It's not sort of an active law. But Jonathan Mitchell, who is one of the anti-abortion extremist attorneys.
And the architect of so much of the crazy stuff, and from our home state.
Our home state, former Solicitor General of our home state. So he kind of like went digging around. I mean, where are you going to go if you want to restrict people's freedom? Let's go back to the 1800s. So he goes digging around and finds this law, and has been, trying to test, and the anti-abortion movement's been trying to test this notion that somehow this broadly abrogated law, the Comstock Act, doesn't apply to they'll sort of say, well, it doesn't apply to pornography because under the way it's actually drafted, it would apply
it's
to 100%
a whole lot of focused
correct. So it doesn't apply to that.
It's about explicit material, right?
Right. And mifepristone didn't exist in the 1800s. It's been around a long time. Pornography did, but it's it didn't apply to that. But it's going to apply to mifepristone now. So this is a legal theory that I hate to even say legal theory because it's really not.
Right.
But it is now.
It's like a fringe theory that they're trying to make a legal theory. And
Just
Thomas
like they do.
is trying to invite it. He's
And
saying,
so
do it, and I want to, like, I'm giving you
Correct.
the roadmap
Correct.
to test.
Correct. So that was another warning sign when we got these two
Dissents.
dissents showing the fight is not over. And if you want, and you know, we don't even have to make this stuff up. It doesn't even have to be in our messaging. This stuff is from like before women had the right to vote.
Which they'd love to get us back to that.
When
thanks to the
maternal
SAVE Act and all
mortality
this other
rates,
nonsense. Yes.
when maternal mortality rates were high,
Yes.
it's before, you know, it's before so many things, and like this is where they want to take
Before
us
birth
back.
control.
Oh yeah, well, and
Before
and he
modern
was one of the
OBGYN care.
Correct. Exactly. So, welcome
Yeah.
to 2026 in America for women.
So you have been filing so many, as we said, you know, so many cases against this admin. I want to talk about civil rights in a bit, but can you just give us the temperature, like with this court, this Supreme Court, this administration, you know, what's the trend line? You briefly mentioned that they're becoming clearly more political. I remember I was a poor law student. I'm not a practicing lawyer. I did graduate barely from law school.
claim you.
Shout out to the University of Houston
We
Law
claim
Center
you.
for letting me finish despite all my activism that kept me out of class. But they did allow me to have a degree. But I remember famously every professor I had saying, well, they're not political. The Supreme Court's not political. You can't apply a political argument when you're making, you know, your case about something coming out of the court. Well, throw that whole rule book out. We are dealing with a political court.
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
So I think, number one, we have to sort of think about the Supreme Court. We have to think about it through history. We have this notion of the rule of law in democracy, and that's a real thing, and it protects us every day. And we are winning court orders every day that protect people, and there are Supreme Court decisions. Yesterday was the 72nd anniversary of Brown versus Board. When we're filming this, there are Supreme Court decisions that are protecting people every single day. So we want an apolitical rule of law. We want to be a country of laws, of principles, and not of one man in the White House. Okay, that's
Right.
what we're supposed to be. And at the same time, if we look through history, the court has not been a court that has reliably protected the rights of all of us. It's reliably protected the rights of, you know, some privileged white guys sometimes, but it hasn't reliably
And corporations.
but it hasn't reliably protected the rights of everyone that makes up this democracy. The exception to that was, if you look at like 1954, Brown versus Board, there was about a decade and a half where the court was really reliably issuing a range of civil rights decisions. You know, the Miranda decision, Miranda versus Arizona, Gideon versus Wainwright to give you an attorney, Griswold versus Connecticut for contraception, Roe v. Wade. So you have that period of time. And because of the age we all are, we think of that as like that was what we learned in school, and that's what the
Right.
Supreme Court does. And the sad history of this court is that, like so many other institutions in our country, it wasn't built to hold a democracy for all of us. And at its best, it does that. And at its worst, it doesn't. And what we have seen over the past decades, a backlash to Brown versus Board, you can go back and trace it. A backlash is a far-right legal movement that has been shifting and sort of trying to pack these courts and trying to shift out of a lot of the protections that we won in the civil rights era through the court. So all of that on a macro level is to say, people that are upset about this court are right to be upset about this court, but we are wrong to think that this is the first time in history that we have faced a Supreme Court that wasn't protecting us. If you think about Dred Scott, Plessy versus Ferguson, Korematsu, I mean, you know, we can just name them and name them. And so that means the fight is with the people, which is why I so admire the work you do. We do a lot of work to protect people, and we're going to use the courts to try to protect people and to hold the courts to their purpose. But that's the work. So where are we? I think the Supreme Court, while it has decimated voting rights, which I know we'll talk about, and will definitely issue some decisions that will harm people that we will probably disagree with, I think that it's going to be much harder at the Supreme Court for the president. And you've already seen that. You saw it on tariffs. I believe, you know, Cecilia Wang did such a great job in the birthright citizenship argument, but I think you're going to see a range of these fringe theories that the administration is out peddling, that far-right groups are out trying to amplify. I don't think that the court is going to be able to go that far. I think that there's going to have to be massive changes to this court when the people win, okay? And we can talk about that. But I just want to say this little talking point from the White House that they somehow have it all locked up at the Supreme Court, we're already seeing that's not true on this, you know, on a range of decisions. The second thing is that the Supreme Court's one court, but right now there have been about 750 lawsuits filed against this administration. Less than 5% of them
We'll make it.
are going, even with them wanting to go every day. I mean, they want to go to the Supreme Court every day, and there's still so few are going, and they're losing about 70 to 80% of the time.
And that means those lower federal courts are making the decisions.
Their orders are staying. And the other thing is, which of course the White House doesn't want reported, we're trying to amplify it, so thank you for creating time here to do it, is that what we're seeing in a lot of our cases is you go in and sue the administration. Often just the fact of suing them gets them to back off, to shift their position, and we're able to protect communities that way. So it really is the act of showing up and using the courts that has been really important, because it helps amplify. It cuts through some of this media cycle. People sometimes want to talk about a lawsuit. It kind of cuts through that and gives people time. So that's kind of the temperature. But the voting rights decision,
let's talk about
was yet another
happened.
Devastating blow to our democracy
Calais.
from this Supreme Court. It's a devastating impact. Nobody's going to be able to say anything otherwise. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act enabled maps to be drawn in ways that communities could be represented, and particularly communities, if there were communities where a third of the people or a majority of the people are of one particular race, you had the ability for maps to be drawn to respect the community's voices.
And the Voting Rights Act applies, just as a refresher, to places where there was historic disenfranchisement.
Correct. Well, that's where this is what's so nuts about it. So this wasn't just
not out of the
there,
blue.
just right, exactly. These were the states that frankly never abided by the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution, and then
known violators of the Constitution.
Jim Crow. And if you're looking at when it was passed, it was about 10 years after Brown v. Board. So you already have this decision coming out of the Supreme Court, and a number of southern states not even wanting to follow a Supreme Court order. I mean, that was the background of a lot, so much of this. And then you continue to have the push for voting rights. And so Section 2 really was a critical piece of that. Section 5, by the way, was also a piece of it which said that there were certain areas in the country where the districts had to be pre-cleared by the Department of Justice because there had been such historical discrimination. The court hollowed that out in 2013 in Shelby County versus Holder. And so now we're at Section 2, and which has become hollowed out. So what you essentially have is the court says, we think racism's over now.
Yeah.
We think it's over. And so we don't really need Section 2. That's actually what they did with Section 5 as well. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg says, that's like throwing your umbrella out because you're dry in the middle of a rainstorm. It's keeping you dry, you throw it out. That's when she became known as the notorious RBG, which her dissent in that case.
Yeah.
And I've thought a lot about her in that dissent as we've looked at Section 2, because they have essentially gutted what was left of so many protections of the Voting Rights Act. So that's a way in which this court, what they've done, what they did with Dobbs, what they have done on so many things, are not reliably protecting people. And when courts...
And out of step with public opinion.
Out of step with public opinion. So when we say the court, I'll get to the kind of court being political in a moment.
Yes.
But totally out of step with public opinion. And out of step with our Constitution. I mean, I will say they're so
and
wrong.
contradicting themselves, right?
They're
Think
so
about
wrong
all
on the
the
law.
times most of this court has shown up, well, everyone on the court, for confirmation. You play the tape, they're contradicting themselves.
Well, and in Shelby County, they say, well, this won't, Robert says, well, this won't really hurt because we have Section 2.
Right. Well, then they're contradicting themselves in real time. You don't even have to go back that far.
So this is a devastating blow, and it's a reason why this country, and I think that the country's there. That's the approval rating of the Supreme Court is at historic lows, and you see that courts get to exist in a democracy, an unelected body that gets to have a lot of say,
appointment.
that gets to have a lot of say over our rights. They only get to exist in a democracy if they're protecting democratic institutions and protecting people that get left out. When the court has faced this legitimacy crisis before in a slew of other terrible decisions at the beginning of the 20th century, and the way it resolved its legitimacy crisis, you have the Civil Rights Court. That's like, we got to do something here because people, I mean,
we've got to respond to the roiling crisis
we're
in this
unelected.
country.
We're over here rolling back people's rights, not protecting. That was what they were striking down workers' rights laws, a range of things. And you don't get to do that if you're a court. You have to protect democratic institutions and protect the people that get left out. And of course, the court did just the opposite in this decision.
Historically, Congress has understood that it has a role in oversight of the court. And we have not seen that lately from this Congress. And I include our friends.
100%.
So there's a whole host of court reforms that our organizations endorse that we are working towards. I don't know where you stand on, all the different court reform solutions, expansion, term limits.
Where I am and what we say all the time, and we're a good
Ethics.
voice on this because we're in the courts every day winning.
Yeah.
Okay, so this isn't like crying over spilled milk. This is a threat to our democracy when you have a court that is not protecting our democratic institutions or protecting people that because of structural and systemic barriers get left out. So where we are is to make sure that people in this country know that people have power to change the court. Their elected representatives have power to change the court. Go open the Constitution. Look at Article 3.
There's a lot
doesn't say
we can
There's
do.
a lot. It doesn't say anything. And by the way, you can amend the Constitution, but you don't even have to do that for court reform. The Supreme Court is the only court that I'm aware of in the country that operates without an enforceable code of ethics.
Right.
And so Congress has a major role that it can play. People have a major role that they can play in demanding better. And that's the piece where we say, people have had to push institutions in this country. We didn't just get recognized and we the people without a whole bunch of people pushing to make that happen. And so I think that's the other piece that we want to permission. We want to call on people to do it, but also I get it. You love our democracy. You have a vision of a Supreme Court. This is a Supreme Court that issued Brown versus Board. I understand people's fidelity to the notion of the rule of law. We rely on that every single day. But the rule of law is not a court that's going to hollow out, restrict our Constitution, do it without any accountability, no ethics code. That's not what we mean by the rule of law. And our Constitution, for some of its flaws, beautifully recognizes that people don't have to be beholden to institutions that aren't serving them, and we have ways to change them. So we've got to all help, call for these reforms. And that's a lot of the work we're doing is trying to educate people. They come to us, they're like, we're so grateful for you. You won this in court. And then they get and then they say, but what about this? And we want to be able to say, look, it's all in there. It's all in the Constitution. Yeah.
So I think that's important because I think that when I talk to members of Congress who are theoretically in support of ethics, rules reform, all the things, there's a feeling that, well, the American people aren't ready yet. There's a lot of education that has to be done. So we've got to do both.
We've got to do it all.
We've got to capitalize on the political frustration with this court by the American people.
Yeah.
But then educate them about what they can hold them accountable for and how.
And that doesn't mean that you're being political. Like, we all understand that there are decisions that you're not going to agree with. And we get to live in a country where we get to say that out loud. We get to push Congress. If this is what Justice Scalia used to say. He was not a particular champion of many of the issues we work on, but he would say, you're upset about it, go push Congress. With some of the folks we have on this court, it's not even clear that they're okay with that. And when Alito's saying, like, what do you mean these states passed laws on abortion? I mean, what are you
going back to Alito, he said in the Dobbs decision, Congress, do your job. You pass a federal bill. But then in this dissent, he basically indicates that he doesn't respect states that pass laws.
So this is why we really want people paying attention, because this is a different type of crisis that we're having with the court. And the other reason that reforms are going to be very important is when I say that people have the lowest approval rating, Supreme Court lowest approval rating in history right now, or hovering there. If you talk to people about their most trusted branch of government, it's the court.
Yeah.
So what does that tell
us?
Now,
that's that
all
low
over
approval
decade
rating.
So that tells us what we're also experiencing in the country, which is that there's just such a decline in trust in institutions overall. I'm never going to defend institutions that aren't serving the people, but we know that folks like Donald Trump and his movement will take a declining trust. They seed that declining trust, and then that's how they convince people that, oh, your democracy is nothing that you really need to fight for or work for. So there's going to be a lot of work to do if we get on the other side of this crisis. And
I think it's going to require Democrats to take action in a much more aggressive way than they're comfortable with. We're going to have to build the foundation of the movement to make sure they understand, if we're lucky enough to win a federal trifecta, We've got to take swift and aggressive action on the courts, on our freedoms, civil rights, reproductive rights, et cetera. That's what people want.
Well, that's what people want. And if we get out of this crisis, I believe we will, by the way.
Good. I love to hear the optimism.
I believe we will.
I do too.
I believe we will. We believe we will. But this is not some little just hill we're going to climb here. It's going to be it's going to be really hard. It is hard. But on the other side of this crisis, if we are able to get through it, which we will be, it will be because of the people. It will not be because of any political party.
Right.
It will be because the American people, regardless of who they used to associate with, whatever, that they came together and said, enough is enough. We're not going to let our democracy go down on our watch. And it's that people power and that people movement that is going to have to make the demands on everyone in power,
right,
to answer the people.
I think that's a really good point, because I was having this conversation today with someone who's an independent voter, and was saying, her frustration with Democrats, her frustration with Republicans. She's lost trust in all parties, all institutions. And she's probably one of those folks we meet who throws up their hands and says, well, what's the point? Right? So whoever gets back in power, it's going to be incumbent on them to build trust again in the institutions.
And to deliver, to actually, and we don't have to build
build
trust in the
trust,
old institutions.
No.
We got to create new institutions that deliver.
They have to see that the institutions are delivering. And right now they're not seeing it. Right?
For good reason.
Right. Well, right now, we are hearing rumors of a vacancy on the Supreme Court potentially coming up. What do you think?
I've heard those rumors. When we say things like, well, the court's political, what we mean by that is that particularly the far right, has, as you know, because you've been on the front lines of these fights for decades, tried to use vacancies as a way of building power, as a way of scaring people, as a way of, when they're not delivering for people, as a way of saying, well, I know that your life is way more expensive. You don't have a job. There's this the Strait of Hormuz is, we're in war. I mean, all this stuff, I know all this stuff is happening to you, but but we have a vacancy and we need,
Let's get everyone excited about it.
It's been in their playbook. Whenever they aren't delivering, there's going to be a vacancy. There's going to be a vacancy, and and then they get to do their cultural politics where they try to pit people against each other on issues that are not really, as we know, they're not really polarizing on the issues, but there's this, cultural rhetoric that they use that try to divide people. It's a playbook.
I mean, yeah, you're right. This is a classic. If you're following the playbook, I just was looking at Trump's approval numbers this morning. They're the lowest historically, I think, of any president.
Correct. Let's
which is why we're in the fight on redistricting, which is why we're, they're trying to grab as many seats as they possibly can, because they know when voters show up in November, they're going to be voting against this administration.
This is an administration that right now is actively working against people being able to use their voice and to vote, because they're so afraid of that accountability.
On multiple levels beyond Calais, it's also like these redistricting fights.
And all the lawsuits we're filing about what DOJ did with our personal data, and 100%.
Thinking about Election Day, I'm hearing a lot of folks are asking me about what the plan is for election interference. And I know you have filed a lot of suits around this, and we've already seen it. So what do you think we should be ready for?
I think, the attempts to undermine people's ability to vote are happening right now.
Right.
Happening at the Supreme Court, happening every time he gets out on television and tries to scare
happening
people.
Happening in these primaries.
So let's just say we're in this now.
Right.
Things we want people to know. Lawyers are going to go to court and fight every single day. Okay. So you don't need to, we want the American people engaged. Email us if you think you hear something, but lawyers are going to be in court across a range of organizations, a range of state AGs,
all working
everybody
together.
They're all that, the legal piece. Now, but what do we know about that? Is that the courts are actually a huge part of what we need to do, but they're not the silver bullet. The people are the only thing. The people are the only thing that can drive these elections. And so what we need people to do is to vote. Make a plan to vote. Help do something beyond that. Help your friends
bring people to the polls.
Bring people to the polls. Be in touch with the organizations that you're already active in. You're going to be putting out resources. We'll share all the resources.
Yep.
Do the thing. When you get the checklist, from League of Women Voters, from Repro Freedom for All, from Democracy Forward, from Indivisible. Go do the thing, right? Because we're going to be ready to respond. But we have seen people in this country and communities in this country make and fight for real change when they did not even have the right to vote. And so there is a path here, but it is going to be really hard. And the best thing that we can do right now with where we are in the country is to make sure the turnout is as large as possible. Don't make the lawyers go fight over 20 votes.
Right.
Seriously.
We have to have such a high level of participation that it'll be almost impossible to repudiate.
Viktor Orban, who was sitting on 15 years of like the results of an autocratic power grab. Like he had everything.
Suppression,
right. He wasn't sitting on a 330 million person country with different voting systems in every state. Like our system is really hard for people to take over. I mean, Trump's going to try, so we're going to try to stop him. But like he had, this country of 10 million people that he had like totally locked up.
Yeah.
And look at it. The turnout was unbelievable, such that he himself had to concede. So we have to channel a little bit of that.
So we have to have higher rates of volunteerism, participation,
civic
all of
engagement.
The things. And we're already building our volunteer army. I know all of our partners are as well. And the last thing we didn't really get a chance to dig into, but if we have a few minutes,
sure.
It goes back to folks will participate, but we have to get through to them about the stakes. And you and I were talking before we started about the challenges we're having in breaking through the noise. And there's so much bad news and so much chaos coming from this admin that it's been hard to get our friends in the press to cover some of the subtleties.
And they're under so much pressure.
Not so subtle things like the fact that women are dying every day from abortion bans. The fact that folks are being denied the right to vote right now. We don't have to wait for the impact of these decisions. And you're right. They're under a tremendous amount of pressure. Media consolidation, corporate takeovers. Our friends at CBS are basically, who knows if they're going to exist by next year. By design, by the way. Your thoughts on breaking through?
Well, this is one. Thank you for having this pod. Yeah, I mean, I listened to this. I don't think I've listened to every single one, but I listened to most of them. I listened to this, and I think that is a piece of it. We're building piece by piece, and a piece of it is to platform and to have the conversations that people need to hear, and to do that now on your own terms, because this is an media environment that is not interested. They're not interested in hearing about all the wins. They're not interested in the answer that if the people decide we're going to be okay after this election, we're going to be okay. Yeah, but we're going to have to get up and do it. The doom scrolling, the mentality just gets, I think, so much of this. Because
it's about an attention economy, right? They need to know what's going to inspire like clicks and views, and it's the bad news.
It's the bad news.
We need to give people hope, which is the good news. And you're winning. The good news is you're winning.
Yeah, and people are suffering, and so none of us are ever going to feel like we've done enough or that we're winning. But what we are seeing is we are winning the president's campaign to act as if he is untouchable.
Correct.
I mean, he's losing in court, on a range of issues every day. His friends over at the Supreme Court have already ruled on him on some of his big priorities like tariffs. I think you're going to continue to see, like I said, they are going to issue rulings checking executive power. They're just not issuing as many rulings as they need to be checking executive power.
Enough.
Yeah.
Right. And then when we started off, we talked about how even when we're losing some of these bigger fights, we're winning. The movements are winning. We're seeing unprecedented numbers of folks showing up for protests like No Kings. We're seeing states and activists making sure folks get abortion care no matter where they live. We're seeing so many organizations step up like they did in Alabama this weekend to protest Calais. I've seen a rejuvenation of the progressive movement as a result, and a lot of folks who aren't political wanting to sign up and participate.
I think that, I think one of the things about this administration, and we said this at the outset, and it's proven true in our work, they always underestimate people.
Yeah.
They underestimate people. Like, they don't understand public service. They don't understand millions of people that actually would dedicate their lives to serving others. So they come in and try to decimate the civil service and think that's going to be popular. It was horribly it's very unpopular.
Massively unpopular.
Right? They don't understand that if you tell someone, I'm trying to take your vote, I mean, I'm going to go vote. I'm going to go, do the thing I need to do to make sure my community is represented. They underestimated the care that people have for communities in this country. They underestimate the care that white communities are having for immigrant communities. And white communities, we need to be doing a whole lot more. But man, they have underestimated that. And so I think that that's what gives me hope. It is going to be really hard work. And we do need a media environment that will have these conversations and that will help guide us through, which is why I'm so grateful you had me on today.
Well, I'm going to have you back. There's a lot to track. Thank you for being on. Thank you for all your great work. Thank you to your entire team. We get to work with a lot of them. And, it's inspiring to see how many folks joined you in Democracy Forward, from the Biden admin, from other walks of life, because they want to fight. And I think a lot of folks think, when you lose, the losing side is resigned and kind of packs up, and that's not the case.
That's not the case, and that's not the case of the story of this country. And I think that's what we have to think about. If we think about what we're most proud of in this country, we didn't get it without a struggle.
Grassroots movements.
We didn't get it without a struggle. And no institution ever handed down any kind of decision that protected our rights. People push those institutions. People push those institutions. And the people are responsible for those wins. And we're going to have to find that again and win again.
Well, that's a great way to end it. I'm with you. I am optimistic that we're going to find it. I think we're already seeing it. And we have a lot of great opportunities. So I'm going to ask you to text VOTE to 59791, and we're going to keep engaging with you. You can sign up to be a member. You can knock on doors with us. We're running campaigns already. We've got primaries happening right now. There's a lot of great folks to elect. We'll send you our list of folks who we've endorsed who are running for office, and how you can work with great organizations like Skye Perryman's Democracy Forward. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon.